Sarah Mitchell's hand was shaking so badly she almost dropped her phone. She had just sent her private financial information, bank balance, rent receipt, all of it to William Thorne, the CO, her boss's boss's boss, the most powerful man at Meridian Enterprises, and the last person on Earth who should ever see how close to broke she really was. It was a stupid autocomplete error, one wrong click in her email, and now there was no taking it back. Mommy, is something wrong? 8-year-old Emma looked up from her homework, her eyes far too perceptive for a child her age. No, sweetheart, just a work thing. Sarah forced a smile, the kind she perfected over years of protecting her kids from her own worry. She was raising Emma and her 10-year-old brother Jacob alone, in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Portland that she'd made into a home with secondhand furniture and her children's artwork on the walls. The rent ate most of her paycheck, but the school district was good, and that mattered more to her than anything she could buy herself. She told herself William Thorne had probably already left the office. He wouldn't see the email until morning, if he saw it at all. His assistant would likely catch it first. That thought gave her almost no comfort. She didn't sleep that night. She kept imagining him scrolling past her name, seeing the numbers, picturing her scraping together rent after Emma's emergency dental bill. Would he think she was incompetent? Would it cost her the raise she desperately needed? Morning came too fast. Sarah packed lunches, dropped the kids at school, and rehearsed apologies the entire drive to work, though she told herself it was pointless. Executives on the top floor didn't deal with administrative assistants like her. The morning passed in ordinary silence. By lunch, she'd almost convinced herself the whole thing had vanished into the void of a busy man's inbox. Then her desk phone rang. Sarah Mitchell, this is Marianne from Mr. Thorne's office. He'd like to see you at 2 o'clock today. Her stomach dropped. Did he say what it's about? No details were given. Please be punctual. The line went dead. In 3 years at Meridian, Sarah had never once been called to the executive floor. She texted her friend Lisa. CEO wants to see me at 2. I'm freaking out. Lisa showed up at her desk within minutes. Nobody gets called up there unless it's really good or really bad, Lisa said, after hearing about the email. Maybe it's about the marketing project you helped save last month. Sarah wanted to believe that. She didn't. At 1:55, she stepped into the elevator in her gray pencil skirt and blue blouse, suddenly feeling small against the glass and chrome world that opened when the doors slid back on the top floor. Marianne, sharp and elegant, gestured to a chair. He's on a call. Shouldn't be long. On the wall hung a portrait of William Thorne, younger than Sarah expected, early 40s, with piercing gray eyes and premature silver threading through dark hair. He'd taken Meridian from a regional company to a national name in just 5 years. The legend preceded the man. When Marianne finally called her in, the real William Thorne was even more imposing than his portrait, well over 6 feet, with a handshake that was firm but oddly warm. He gestured for her to sit. Sarah Mitchell, he said, thank you for coming up. I suspect you know why I asked to meet with you. Her throat went dry. Sir, about the email, I'm so sorry. It was a terrible mistake. He held up a hand, stopping her. Actually, I'm glad it happened. It brought something important to my attention. She blinked. I don't understand. He opened a folder on his desk. 3 years with the company. Performance reviews consistently excellent. You stepped in last month and, according to your director, saved the marketing team's product launch. He looked up at her. And yet your compensation doesn't reflect any of that. Sarah didn't know what to say. I saw the rent figure on that email, he continued. I looked into your file afterward. The math doesn't add up, Miss Mitchell. How are you managing? Pride wrestled with honesty. Honesty won. Very carefully, she admitted. Something shifted in his expression. Was it respect? Family in the area? Any support system? No. My parents are in Florida. My sister's overseas in the military. It's just me and my 2 kids. He nodded slowly, making a note. How old? 10 and 8. He closed the folder. Here's what's going to happen. First, you're getting a 20% raise, effective immediately, which is closer to what you should have been earning all along. Second, I'm moving you to the executive support team. Better hours, and the package includes child care benefits. Sarah felt the room tilt. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Yes, but why? His expression softened just slightly. Let's just say your email reminded me of something I've forgotten. He stood, signaling the meeting's end. Mary Ann will handle the paperwork. You'll start Monday. As Sarah reached the door, he stopped her. One more thing, Miss Mitchell. I have a personal matter I could use your help with. Would you and your children be free this Saturday afternoon? Before she could respond, he added, I promise it's not as strange as it sounds. Mary Ann will give you the details. Riding the elevator down, Sarah had no idea what she just walked into or why a single mistaken email had changed everything in the span of one conversation. The rest of the week was a blur of excitement and nerves. When Sarah told the kids about the raise, Jacob immediately asked about a dog, something she'd always said no to because of deposits and vet bills. Maybe, she told him, unwilling to promise anything before the money actually landed in her account. By Friday, Mary Ann's instructions arrived. A car would collect them at noon Saturday. Casual dress. Planned to be out until evening. Nothing more, no matter how many times Sarah asked. Mom, what if he's secretly a kidnapper? Jacob asked while she sorted through his dresser. She laughed despite herself. CEOs don't usually need to kidnap their assistants and their kids, buddy. Maybe he's just nice, Emma offered, brushing her doll's hair. Like a secret Santa. In September. That's dumb. You're dumb. Hey! Sarah cut in, the practiced reflex of a single mother refereeing. We don't talk to each other like that. And Jacob, ideas aren't dumb. That night, tucking them in, Sarah ran searches on William Thorne and found almost nothing personal. Business articles, a few charity photos, no mention of wife or kids, though she noticed a wedding band in the more recent pictures. Saturday brought perfect fall weather. At noon, a black SUV pulled up, driven by a kind-eyed older man named Frank. Mr. Thorne sends his apologies, unexpected call. Frank said, We'll meet at the destination. And where's that? Sarah asked, buckling Emma in. Frank only smiled. He asked me to keep it a surprise, ma'am. They drove west, climbing into the hills above Portland, until they passed through iron gates and up a long, tree-lined driveway. Whoa! Jacob breathed, pressing his face to the window. Is that his house? It was a sprawling craftsman-style mansion, gardens stretching around it, a barn visible in the distance. Sarah's nerves spiked again. This was an office. This was his home. The door opened before they reached it. Not to William, but to a silver-haired woman in her 70s with bright, sharp eyes. You must be Sarah and the children. I'm Martha, William's mother. Come in. He's just finishing a call. Inside, the house felt surprisingly lived in despite its size. Worn leather sofas, shelves crammed with books. Cookies, Martha offered, and the kids lit up instantly. While Martha fetched a tray, Sarah studied the framed photographs lining the walls. William as a serious-faced boy, a teenager with sports trophies, a graduate in cap and gown, in several. He stood beside a blonde woman with a brilliant smile. That's Caroline, William's wife, Martha said, returning. She passed 5 years ago. Cancer. She was only 32. I'm so sorry, Sarah murmured. Martha's face shadowed, then brightened. Now, tell me about yourselves while we wait. Jacob dove into a detailed account of his science project. Emma studied Martha with open curiosity. Are you a grandma? Emma, Sarah said, mortified. Martha only laughed. No, dear. William and Caroline never had children. That's sad, Emma said simply. Everyone should have kids. They're a lot of work, but Mom says we're worth it. Martha's eyes crinkled. A wise mother indeed. I have no idea why Mr. Thorne invited us here, Sarah admitted quietly. William has his reasons, Martha said. He always does. A door opened, and William appeared, in jeans and casual shirt, nothing like the man behind the desk. Thank you for coming, Sarah. He turned to the children. And you must be Jacob and Emma. I hear you're quite the scientist, Jacob. And Emma, my mother tells me you have excellent taste in cookies. The chocolate ones are best, Emma said solemnly. A faint smile touched his mouth. Indisputably correct. He turned back to Sarah. I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here. The thought crossed my mind. Perhaps it's easier if I just show you. He led them through the house to a covered patio overlooking rolling hills and a small lake. But it wasn't a view that caught everyone's attention. It was the elderly golden retriever struggling to lift himself from a dog bed. This is Rusty, William said, kneeling beside him. He's been with me 12 years. He's not well. The dog's tail thumped weakly as William scratched behind his ears. Is he sick? Jacob asked, approaching slowly. Arthritis, a heart condition. The vet comes twice a week. William paused, choosing his words. I traveled too much to give him what he needs in his final months. Understanding began to dawn on Sarah. You're looking for someone to care for him? In a manner of speaking. He stood. When I got your email, I recognize your address. Your building belongs to a Meridian subsidiary. It has a strict no-pets policy, which, as majority shareholder, I can waive in special circumstances. He paused again. But Rusty needs more than that. He can't manage stairs anymore. What I'm proposing is different. He gestured toward the property. My mother lives here alone since my father passed. I split my time between here and a downtown condo. There's a caretaker's cottage on the grounds. 3 bedrooms, fully furnished, currently empty. Sarah felt her breath catch as the pieces fell into place. The position comes with a cottage, utilities covered, and a salary to match your new role, William said, his tone businesslike despite the strangeness of the offer. In exchange, you and your children would help care for Rusty and keep my mother company. She refuses to admit she shouldn't be alone at her age. I heard that. Martha called from the doorway, arms crossed, eyes twinkling. 6 months to start, William added. Renewable by agreement. Sarah's mind raced. A furnished home, no rent, clean air, space for her kids to run. It sounded impossible. Why me? She asked. You could hire professionals for both. William's gray eyes held hers. Your email was a wake-up call. Sarah, a reminder that behind every name on this payroll is a person with real struggles. He glanced toward Jacob and Emma, now petting Rusty under Martha's supervision. And honestly, this house needs children in it again. The words carried more weight than he probably intended. May I have some time to think it over? Of course. He hesitated. Though I should mention, there's a school bus that stops at the end of our driveway. The district has a gifted program Jacob might qualify for. Sarah stared at him, struck by how much he'd already learned about her family. It should have unsettled her. Instead, for the first time in years, she felt seen. The cottage exceeded every expectation. Stone walls, wooden beams, a wraparound porch with a swing. Mom, my room has a window seat. Emma called from upstairs. Mine has a telescope, Jacob shouted back. A real one. Sarah ran her hand along the kitchen counter, still in disbelief. After a sleepless night weighing the offer, she called and accepted. Now, 1 day later, they were moving in. It's perfect, she told Martha, who arrived with a basket of muffins. I don't know how to thank you. William mentioned your children's father isn't around, Martha said, arranging the muffins. Sarah tensed. He left when Emma was a baby. His loss, Martha said firmly, with a tone that suggested she wasn't only talking about Sarah's situation. Rusty followed the children down the stairs at his own careful pace. He knows this house, Martha explained. This cottage was built for the old groundskeeper. Rusty spent his puppy days right here. That evening, Martha insisted they all join her and William for dinner. A nothing fancy meal that turned out to be 3 courses in a dining room built for 20. Jacob talked through a solar panel project with wild hand gestures. William, quiet for most of the meal, leaned in with real interest. Have you considered a battery storage component? It would solve the intermittency problem. Jacob's eyes lit up. Like a backup system. That's brilliant. I have books on renewable energy in the library, William offered. Borrow whatever you like. Thanks, Mr. Thorne. William, he corrected gently. Mr. Thorne makes me feel like my father. Was he strict? Emma asked, with a bluntness only a child could manage. A shadow crossed William's face. Very. He nearly ran the company into the ground with that approach. William rebuilt it from nothing. Martha added with open pride. William looked uncomfortable with the praise and changed the subject. But walking back to the cottage under the stars, Sarah found herself wondering about Caroline and why a man so clearly good with children had never had any of his own. The weeks settled into rhythm. Mornings, Sarah walked Rusty before getting the kids ready. The school bus now stopped at the end of the long driveway instead of the city street. At the office, her new role kept her busy managing schedules for several executives, including William. He remained distant during the week, but on weekends he started appearing more, joining walks with Rusty, fielding Jacob Science questions, occasionally staying for dinner at the cottage, where the conversation flowed easier than it ever did in the big house. One Saturday, Sarah found him in the kitchen, covered in flour, attempting to bake cookies with Emma while Martha was out. She insisted, he said, sheepish, and my mother left explicit instructions. Caroline was the baker, he admitted quietly. I never paid attention when she tried to teach me. It was a small thing, but it felt like a door opening. Sarah rolled up her sleeves. Looks like you two could use some help. By the time Thanksgiving approached, nearly 2 months had passed. Jacob was thriving at his new school. Emma had blossomed under Martha's attention. The only shadow over the property was Rusty, whose good days were growing fewer. More than once, Sarah found William sitting beside him late at night, one hand on the dog's fur, the other working on his laptop. He was a wedding gift from Caroline, William told her one evening when she brought him coffee. She grew up with Goldens. Couldn't imagine a house without one. He was quiet, then added, December 9th would have been our 15th anniversary. I'm sorry, Sarah said, understanding the weight of dates that never stop hurting. Caroline wanted children, he continued, surprising her with how openly he spoke. We tried for years. Then came the diagnosis, and the timeline just collapsed. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I should explain something about why I offered you this. Her heart picked up. When I got your email, I was in a board meeting about cost-cutting, staff reductions. Your address caught my eye because I recognized the property. I pulled your file out of curiosity. He ran a hand through his hair. Your salary was enough for one person, let alone 3, and your reviews were exemplary. It made me wonder what else was being missed. So I was a case study, Sarah said, trying to keep the hurt out of her voice. At first, he admitted. Then I met you and your children, and he glanced toward Rusty. It stopped being professional. My father believed business and personal life should never touch, he went on. I followed that until Caroline got sick. She made me promise to do better, to remember that behind every decision are real people. Your email reminded me how far I still had to go. Before Sarah could respond, Martha appeared, her face grave. William, it's Richard Graham. He says it's urgent. William's warmth vanished instantly, replaced by something tighter, more guarded. He excused himself. Martha sighed once he'd gone. That man never gives my son a moment's peace. Who is he? Lawrence's old business partner. William's godfather, a man with questionable ethics and far too much influence on the board. She paused. He's never approved of William's direction. The focus on people instead of pure profit. Walking back to the cottage with Rusty padding slowly beside her, Sarah felt the pieces shifting into something larger than she'd realized. This wasn't just kindness. It was a quiet act of defiance against the legacy William was trying to leave behind. And somehow, without meaning to, she and her children had become part of it. The Monday before Thanksgiving, an email from HR summoned Sarah to a floor she'd never visited. 3 executives waited in a conference room. William was conspicuously absent. Miss Mitchell, said an older man in steel-rimmed glasses. Richard Graham, chairman of the board. He gestured to the others. I understand you've entered into an unusual housing arrangement with our CEO. Sarah straightened. Mr. Thorne has allowed my family to stay in his caretaker's cottage while we help with his mother and his dog. It's temporary, with clear responsibilities on both sides. And your promotion, was that part of the arrangement too? The implication stung. My promotion came before the housing offer, based entirely on my work. We have concerns about a conflict of interest, Graham continued smoothly. William has always been susceptible to emotional decisions, a trait his father found troubling. There is nothing inappropriate about our arrangement, Sarah said, her hands trembling under the table even as her voice held steady. Perhaps not technically, but perception matters. William is in the middle of sensitive negotiations with Eastern Continental. Any hint of impropriety could undermine that. He slid a folder across the table. We're offering a transfer, Seattle office, a substantial raise, your own housing allowance, a fresh start away from any complications. The offer was tempting and insulting in equal measure. Who proposed this? Sarah asked. The board believes it's best for everyone, Graham said, dodging the question. William forms attachments that cloud his judgment. His wife's illness affected his leadership. We can't afford another distraction. The mention of Caroline, tossed off so casually, sent a flash of anger through her. Does William know about this meeting? His silence answered for him. I'll need to discuss this with Mr. Thorne before deciding anything, Sarah said, rising. That would be inadvisable, Graham warned. This offer may not stand if you involve him. Then I suppose I'll take that risk. She walked out before her composure could crack, and made it exactly as far as the restroom before it did. Her phone buzzed. A text from Martha. Come home early if you can. Rusty isn't doing well. Personal crisis swallowed professional fearhole. Sarah told her supervisor it was a family emergency and drove straight to the estate. Rusty's breathing was labored, his eyes clouded but still tracking the room. The vet was just here, Martha said quietly. It's time. William's flying back from Chicago, but he's still 3 hours out. Jacob's face was streaked with tears. We can't let him hurt, Mom. Sarah knelt beside her children. I know this is hard, but sometimes the kindest thing we can do for the ones we love is let them go when it's time. William should be here, Martha said, distress breaking through her usual composure. Sarah did the math. Even with a perfect landing and a straight drive, he might not make it. She couldn't let Rusty wait in pain for a chance like that. Let me call him. William answered immediately. Airport noise behind him. When she explained, his voice cracked. Put the phone by his ear. She held it close, and Rusty's tail thumped weakly at the sound of his voice. William spoke softly, thanking him for years of loyalty. By the time he finished, no one in the room had dry eyes. Sarah, he said finally, if you think it's time, please, don't let him be alone. We're all here, she promised. We won't leave him. The vet returned half an hour later. Rusty slipped away peacefully, surrounded by the people who had come to love him in his final months. Martha retreated to the main house. Grief carved fresh into her face. The children, wrung out, fell asleep early. Sarah sat alone on the porch as darkness settled over the property. Around 9, headlights swept up the driveway. William stepped out, tie loose, eyes red. You made it, she said softly. Too late, he said, voice hollow. But he heard your voice. He knew you were coming. He sank onto the step, beside her. Thank you for being there, for handling what I couldn't. After a long silence, Sarah gathered her courage. I need to tell you something. I met with Richard Graham today. William's face hardened. What did he want? She told him everything. Watched anger, then resignation, then something harder settle over his features. A transfer to Seattle, he repeated. Classic Richard. Remove the problem instead of fixing what's actually wrong. He pushed a hand through his hair. My father built this company as a machine for profit. No room for human cost. When I took over, I started shifting that. Sustainability, employee welfare. Richard's faction sees it as weakness. They mentioned a merger, Sarah said. Eastern Continental. If it goes through, it changes the whole company. If it fails, Richard gets the ammunition. He needs to push me out. And they see me as a distraction. William turned to face her fully. They see what I've been afraid to admit myself. He reached for her hand. My father believed personal and professional lives should never mix. I believed that too, until Caroline showed me how wrong it was. When she died, I buried myself in work because grief was hard to face. His fingers tightened around hers. Your email made me see what I'd been ignoring. That people aren't just resources. They're messy and complicated and worth everything. William, She started, unsure where this was going. "I don't want you to go to Seattle," he said simply, "but I won't stand in your way if that's what you choose." Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Final offer. Seattle package. Plus college funds for both children. Decision required by noon tomorrow. She showed him. His jaw tightened. "He's playing hardball, using your kids as leverage." "It's a generous offer," she admitted, reluctant. "It's manipulation." He stood abruptly. "But he's right that your children's future matters. I need to make some calls. Will you be all right?" She nodded, too drained to ask more. The next morning, Sarah dropped the kids at school with the noon deadline pressing on her chest. At the office, she found her co-workers gathered around a break room television. "Emergency board meeting," someone explained. William called it first thing. "They're streaming it to every employee." On screen, William stood at a podium, immaculate and commanding, the board seated behind him. Richard Graham's face already souring. "Meridian was founded on innovation and excellence," William began. "But somewhere along the way, we lost sight of our most valuable asset, our people." He laid out a sweeping new benefits package. Expanded parental leave, childcare subsidies, education assistance, and a housing initiative for employees facing hardship. These changes are non-negotiable. They will be in place before any further discussion with Eastern Continental proceeds. The camera caught Graham's furious expression as William continued. "I've also established a foundation in my late wife's name to support employees facing medical crises or family emergencies. Caroline believed in people first, profit second. It's time this company finally lived up to that." Sarah watched, stunned, as William rewrote company policy live on camera, directly confronting the old guard he'd spent years quietly resisting. It was strategy and it was personal all at once. Her phone buzzed. "Martha, come home when you can. Important news." The cottage smelled like dinner when Sarah arrived that evening, an unusual weeknight occasion. Jacob and Emma were setting the table. An unopened bottle of champagne sat on the counter. "William's on his way," Martha said, smiling in a way Sarah couldn't quite read. "He asked us to wait." He arrived 20 minutes later, looking simultaneously wrecked and lit up from within. "Did you see it?" "Everyone did," Sarah said. "It was extraordinary." "Richard resigned an hour later," William said, unable to keep the satisfaction out of his voice. 3 other board members followed. Martha clapped her hands together. "Good riddance. Lawrence's old guard is finally gone." William turned to the children, who'd been quietly watching the grown-up conversation. "Jacob, Emma, I have a question for you. How would you feel about a puppy?" Their eyes went wide in unison. "Really?" Jacob breathed. "A golden retriever?" "Rusty's breeder called last week. New litter, they've offered us first pick." "Us?" Emma asked. William glanced at Sarah. "That depends on your mother." Martha quietly herded the children into the other room, leaving William and Sarah alone in the kitchen. "The Seattle offer?" Sarah asked, officially withdrawn, along with Richard's seat on the board. A small smile crossed his face. Inspired by a misdirected email, but it became something that's going to help hundreds of employees. "You risked everything today," Sarah said, shaking her head. "No," he said softly. "I found everything." He took her hands. "Sarah, I want to ask you something different. Not a temporary arrangement this time." Her breath caught. "The cottage is yours for as long as you want it, no strings attached," he said quickly. "But I'm hoping you'll consider something more permanent. For all of us." "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" His gray eyes held steady on hers. "Caroline once told me I'd recognize a second chance of happiness if I was brave enough to see it. She was right." From the next room, Jacob and Emma's laughter mixed with Martha's voice as they debated puppy names. The sound of family, the kind both Sarah and William had lost in different ways and never expected to find again. "We've only known each other a few months," Sarah said carefully, though her heart was racing. "And yet," William said, "that mistaken email is the most fortunate accident of my life." Sarah thought of everything that had led to this moment. A desperate single mother scraping together rent. And now this. Life rarely gave you neat resolutions, but every once in a while, it gave you a second chance. The puppy will need a proper home, she said finally, smiling. With a family. William's face broke.